Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the HR podcast. Today I'm with Diane. This is her second time. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me back.
Now that's great to have you back. So for those who might be maybe new to the community or the podcast, could you briefly share your journey to the HR field and what drives your passion in this area?
Absolutely. So for those who are new to the group and to the podcast, my name is Diane and I've been in the HR field for over 15 years now. I'm starting to lose track of how long it's been. It's been a fun journey for sure. I've had a bit of a rough start to my career working within a company that didn't have a structured HR department and not having that piece of learning development, that nurturing piece, and having to learn very early on in my career how to fish for myself and how to find creative solutions and creative ways to learn and develop myself. And those ways that I still apply them today when I'm supporting others in their learning development journey. Within my career, throughout my career in HR, I have been exposed to a variety of roles within the organizations that I have worked for within the HR function. And I have had the opportunity to explore how much HR means to the organizations and all the different aspects of it and how complex yet very interesting the function is. And that drives my passion for not only HR as a function, but the piece that it plays within the success of a company.
All right. So your LinkedIn headline mentions you as a process efficiency champion. Can you elaborate on what that means to you and how it has shaped your HR approach?
Sure. Being a process efficiency champion to me means looking for better ways to really complete the HR tasks. And if we have a better way to complete your day-to-day tasks, that means more time to think through plans and driving success within the organization. If we spend 2 hours working on a task that should take 20 minutes, that means we have less time to provide advice, sound advice to the business and to drive success. So it's very important to me that we look at, okay, the process might be good now, but can it be better? Right? It takes 2 hours to do something, but can we shrink it down to maybe one? Is that possible? Sometimes it isn't. But it's very important to me to look at those items, not only for myself, but also for teams who are working with me or reporting to me to really understand how can we be more efficient? How can we make better use of our time? And a lot of times, the answer to that is process efficiency. It pays off to really say, let's take a step back and deconstruct the process for a minute. It might take a little bit more time, but it's worth. It's the whole idea of short-term pain for long-term gain, right? And so just take a minute to rethink the process. Sometimes, you gotta flip it inside out, turn it upside down, give it a good shake, and clean it up a little bit, and then put it back in order. And then the result, when properly executed and when possible, really is a process that takes less time, it's more intuitive. It works better. And that means the organization will have a better experience. The employees will have a better experience. The HR professionals will be able to really focus more on that sound advice and really driving that business result.
All right, that's perfect. So having worked in both food and beverage manufacturing and chemical manufacturing industries, how would you describe the transition and the unique challenges that each industry has presented to you?
I believe most of the challenges that I've faced moving between industries have been related to how we support employees. And a lot of it is related to whether or not you have a heavy exempt or non-exempt workforce and what the deliverables are for the organization. I've seen a bigger shift between organizations than between industries, if that makes sense. And the reason why I say that is because you could have two companies within, let's say, chemical manufacturing, right? And it's the same industry. Both companies operate very differently and they have very different cultures. And so I see a bigger shift between companies than industries. Nonetheless, there is a shift in cultural approach between industries. And I'll give you an example. From a service industry standpoint, a lot of the focus really is on the customer experience, right? And so a lot of the focus from a company standpoint should, and I'm going to emphasize the word should, I'm not going to speak for every company and how they operate, but the focus in that case should be on making sure that the employees are well prepared to provide that service, right? It's more outwards. If you're looking at an organization that is perhaps in the manufacturing industry, it's more of an inward look. It's more about how their processes work to support that constant deliverable of either products, equipment that they are really putting out to sell to a customer. And so really the focus is more inwards on how do we make sure that the employees have what it needs to produce more and more to meet those deadlines, those deliverables and whatnot. If you're looking more from a creative organization, whether we're talking about software development or marketing, for example, right? The focus is how do we stimulate creativity? How do we stimulate that? And the approach to the culture is going to really have to focus a little bit more on how do we bring that out in the employees that are providing that. And so the approach to how the employees are supported from a total reward standpoint, the compensation package, any perks the organization might offer will look a little bit different between those industries for those reasons that I've just mentioned. And also the approach to that bond that the employees have within themselves, right? But like I said, there's a shift between industry, but I've seen a bigger shift between organizations, even within the same industry. And that relates a lot to how the organization is structured, what kind of support they have, and how the employees feel either supported or not. Again, depending on the processes that they have and what kind of support they provide to the employees. Going back to the process efficiency, I will share that I've worked for organizations that have very challenging processes, and that is extremely frustrating to the employees. I've also worked for organizations where they have very efficient processes. They have a very efficient self-service model, and the employees feel very comfortable saying, I can just go into the system. I can plug in my information. I can get what I want. It's easy. It's effective. I don't have to wait for somebody to be in the office to answer a question. I can easily get to it. And so, again, back to the process efficiency, whether it's between industries or companies, that is going to play a very important role in the employee experience and the culture of the organization overall.
All right. So, in our previous conversation, we touched upon the importance of company culture. So, since then, have you observed any significant shifts or trends in how companies approach culture, especially in the context of the global challenges that we have faced?
I have, and more specifically, more on the work-life balance piece of it. There are so many facets to a company culture, but I would say the biggest shift that I've seen lately has been in the work-life balance. We've seen a shift along many, many, many years, but I've seen a more concerted effort to focus on that lately over the last, I'd say, probably 3 to 5 years. And a lot of that really is driven by the workforce. I got to be honest. And the workforce really having that different view on what work life balance means, what it looks like to them, what it means to them, and the value that that has, right? For many years, there was a lot of value put on how much am I getting paid? What does my salary look like? What does my bonus look like? And I'm not negating the importance of that. It is still important, yes. But with the workforce really transitioning between generations, we've seen a more a stronger approach to that work-life balance and more emphasis on, yes, that's a great salary, but am I going to be able to have a life outside of work? And what does the quality of that life look like if I'm not working all the time, right? There's been more of an effort to think about a global approach. Does the work have to be done within that specific country? And I'm not just referring to the US right now, but the focus on where the work is placed and how the work is delivered and how different cultures in different countries operate and how they have different solutions to perhaps the same problem. I've seen, obviously, working in the US, most of my look into that has been within companies within the US to really understand that the world does not revolve around the US, and there are other countries that view problems differently. They have a different approach to that. And quite often, I've seen companies go, can we call that company all the way in the other country, all the way out there, and ask them, how did they get to that point? How did they get so efficient, right? And again, it's not to say that we've never done that before. It's been done, obviously. And throughout my career, 15 plus years, I've always heard of other companies in other countries doing things a bit better and the US picking up on that. But I've seen a bigger shift over the last few years on looking, taking more of a global approach to that knowledge piece and really embracing that diversity, right? We talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about embracing that, but we've been able to take it one step further and look beyond demographics, right? When we talk about diversity and we look at diversity of thought that comes from the different cultures across the globe, and being able to be open to that and look at that and say, I haven't thought about it that way. And so I've seen a bigger shift as it relates to that. And like I said, from a culture standpoint, to be able to listen to the workforce. The workforce is driving a lot of that change. How they respond to the requests from their managers or from the organization, right? How they respond to that is driving how the companies are behaving, and what they're open to and what they're open to rethink and modify to follow that flow.
All right. Yep. Uh, Also, I wanted to add to your answer that there are some countries right now that they are giving some permissions for foreigners to work with the special permissions just because you have a remote work. So yeah, the way that the work life balance um, is seen is changing with the new generations and even with the remote work after the COVID. So yeah, there is a huge change in the last few years, the last I think 4 years since the pandemic. So
I've seen more and more ads and focus on, okay, well, perhaps the salary isn't extremely high, but hey, the trade-off is that you get to work anywhere you want, right? And so we have the nomads, we have the workforce that just travels all over the place because it doesn't really matter where they sit. And organizations are seeing that and they're responding to that. And so they've been able to tap into a workforce that is available, but in a different way than before.
okay, so you're currently working for a company that operates in a very unique industry, which is chemical manufacturing. How does the nature of the industry influence the cultural dynamics within the company?
The first thing that comes to mind is safety. And obviously, going into jumping a little bit outside of the HR realm and looking from a health, safety, environmental, and security standpoint, there's obviously, as you can imagine, being a high risk industry, right? There's a huge focus on safety for the employees. And because of the huge focus on safety, that drives a culture that really emphasizes slow down, take your time, think things through, right? And it's okay to stop and ask questions. It's okay to think through something. It's okay to ask somebody for advice. It's not just go, 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 make it happen, figure it out. The culture has to be of stop, slow down, let's ask questions, let's think this through. And so there is by nature the requirement of that slowdown. The culture has to shift to be more supportive of the I don't understand, let me stop and ask questions versus the fast paced go, 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 go. Figure it out. We don't have time to talk. The nature of the industry drives by default that shift in slow down. It's okay to ask questions. We have to slow down and ask questions if we want to really drive that safety, right? And so the safety records and obviously keep everybody safe. And so I see that again, industries, not, I'm not just referring to chemical manufacturing, right? But just any industry that has a higher safety risk profile will, should, let me rephrase that, should really focus so much on safety that by default it will drive the culture to be more supportive of the slow down, let's think this through, let's get it right so that we don't have a safety incident.
All right. So can you share an instance where you had to champion a cultural or maybe procedural change? What were the challenges and how did you navigate through them?
Let's talk about procedural change for a second. Like I mentioned before, sometimes you have to break a process, right? It's not working as intended. And obviously, you face the usual, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Because it's not perceived as being broken. It's perceived as it's working. Okay, maybe. But is it working as it should? Is it working the best way possible, right? And sometimes we're so comfortable going through the motions and going through the pain that it's hard to think, wait, it could be better, right? A while ago, somebody gave me an example of sometimes, when you move and you get to your new place and you're still unpacking, and there's that box in the living room. And for now, you're just skipping over the box. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. You can still go from one room to another of the house. You're just going to step over that box. Should you be stepping over that box? Probably not, but you know what? You can get between rooms of the house. It's not keeping you from moving, right? And so you just leave that box there for a long time. And then you get used just walking over it. It's just part of your routine. But if you remove that box, then guess what? It feels better. You're not stepping over a box, right? And I know it might sound silly to use that box as an example, but the reality is that we get too comfortable stepping over a box every time, right? It's fine. The process is working. It's okay. But the moment that we remove that box, the moment that we improve the process and we show people this is how great it can be, then it goes, oh, right. Then the whole shift in approach goes, that's actually a good idea. Why did that before? And so it does require sometimes that we will break the process to make it better and fighting over the, okay, why do we have to do this? And sometimes it's hard to see what it can be, right? When you have a vision to go through it. So it requires a lot of change management. It requires a lot of conversations. It requires you to be able to articulate the vision in a way that will have others embrace that vision and drive that with you. And really, the end result for process changes, I've been through quite a few recently. And the end result really is that a task that would take hours now takes just a few minutes. But in order to get to that point, it did require us to say, okay, let's take a group of people aside. Let's talk through it. Let's talk about what is working but could be better. Do we have the right software? Do we have the right training? Do we have the right skills, right? Do we have the right people to make that happen? And sometimes it does take a little bit of a change in groups working through something to be able to provide that creative solution. Changing softwares is not a cheap thing to do, but sometimes that's what's necessary. And so without getting into too much specifics and really just releasing information that's very specific of the organization that I work with, I do want to say this. A lot of times it does take the courage to say, I'm going to have to break something to make it better later. But again, a lot of it revolves around constant communication, clarity when you're trying to explain the vision, really getting the right folks on board to be able to execute on that and being able to deliver as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, the best results. And the more that you can break it down to show the group small wins, the better it becomes. And so if you're talking about a process with multiple steps, perhaps you break it down and you fix step one first. And then you will see that the individuals working through that process will say, wow, that step is so much better. Wait until you see the other steps fixed. And that creates that encouragement, that creates that support. And then guess what? They will be more likely to embrace the change and to say, I cannot wait until you're ready to tackle, step number two in that process. And then you go to those small wins, right? Until you have the entire process either remapped, or perhaps you have a new software, or perhaps you really just have different folks working through it to create better solutions and a better process flow.
I like that your answers are very process efficiency focused. So
I don't listen. I do. I can't. I cannot argue with that. It is a passion of mine. If something is good, I'm always thinking, but can it be better though? Can it? Maybe. Let's find out. It's worth asking, right?
all right. So, given your experience, how would you say that the culture differs between a specialty chemical company and a food production company?
I'm gonna dial it back to safety again. Not to sound like a broken record, but again, the safety approach will drive a lot of that culture, right? Obviously, you're looking at, from a food manufacturer standpoint, you're looking not only at the employee safety side, the community safety side, but you're also looking from a food safety standpoint, right? What is it that we are required to evaluate and think through, right? And from a chemical manufacturer standpoint, you're looking, again, community safety, employee safety, right? But in the end, both of those should drive a focus on slow down, think through what you're going through, think through the steps that you have to go through, all the checklists, all the requirements. It does require a lot of attention to steps and requirements of each specific process you're going through. So it should, by nature, drive that culture of take your time and think it through versus go, 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 go and figure it out on your own.
So, let's keep talking about process efficiency. How do you approach process improvement in HR? And can you share an example where this led to significant efficiency gains for the company?
Process improvement in HR, I believe, can be more challenging than it sounds. I'll give you an example. When we talk about, I'll give you a very simple example. If we're talking about an employee changing addresses, right? And now I'm going all the way to the very first layer of HR, right? That very first employee facing role where the employees are coming in and saying, I moved, what do I do? Right. And you might think, well, that sounds like, big deal, just change that process, right? There are ramifications to that, not only from an HR professional standpoint on how they're going to be handling that, but also from an employee experience standpoint, right? And so moving from a HR function driven activity to a self-service activity can have heavy impact on the workforce. And so it's very important that we focus on that communication and that efficiency gains, not only from an efficiency gains from an HR standpoint, but also from an employee standpoint, right? And so to keep it very simple and very basic, right? If an employee is sitting here saying, okay, well, now I moved, now I have to go wait for office hours and go find that HR person, whether it's a coordinator or a generalist, right? You need to go find that person. I need to fill out a paper form. I need to go talk to them. And if you're working in an industry that runs 24/7, perhaps you have the night shift. Now you're going to have to come in during your off hours when you're trying to sleep and get some rest. But you need to make that happen, right? Shifting that approach to a self-service approach with a robust system that's user-friendly for the employees will have very positive impact on the workforce to say, now I don't have to worry about whether or not it's office hours. Now I don't have to worry about working when I'm supposed to be sleeping or going into the office when I'm supposed to be sleeping to be able to do that. Now I don't have to wait for that person to do something for me, right? I can just grab my phone and boo, 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 done. Address change, right? And so even something that simple can grow legs, right? Because now we're talking about a shift in how the employees approach the HR function, right? So if I'm doing this myself, why are you here? Okay, well, the workforce in general, a lot of times don't understand the HR function. And so it's very important for them to understand why the shift is happening. And it's not just about, I don't want to help you, right? So that communication is very important. The other piece of it really is understanding, do we have the right systems to make that happen? We don't want the employee going into a system, changing their address, and next thing you know, we don't know where that data went. And now the employee is sitting there going, uh-oh, if that information is out there, what else is out there? Do they feel comfortable saying that? Do they feel comfortable using a system and saying, you know what, I can go change my own address? They might not if you don't have the right systems in place, right? And so it's not just about, I have chosen to change a process. It's about, what does that mean for the HR community, for the employee, and for our systems in general, and for the business, right? And so it's very important to have that approach, that constant communication approach, and to evaluate, what does that mean for the business, for the workforce, for the HR community. Not just, hey, this process isn't great, we can make it better, and then just start moving things along without checking those boxes.
Okay, so we are coming to the end of the episode, and the last question will be an advice. Actually, in the first episode that we recorded together, you gave a lot of advices for the HR managers that I recommend watching. So with the evolving landscape of HR technologies, what advice would you give to HR professionals looking to integrate new systems or tools into their workflows?
I highly recommend really diving into the nuts and bolts of a system. If you believe you need a new system, chances are you do. I will say that most of the HR professionals that I've met are very intuitive. If you think you need a new system, you probably do. If you don't have a system, you probably need one. You will see efficiency gains, right? Again, not just from an employee standpoint to say, hey, this is so much easier and I can just get it done right away, but from an HR function standpoint to say, okay, well, if I have a system working in my favor, that means I have more time to now plan for the future, do that workforce planning that takes so much time, complete those calibrations that takes so much time, provide that sound advice to the business, understand the business to the core to be able to provide that the advice as far as business growth goes, right? And so if you think you need a system, you probably do, but I would highly recommend diving into the details of what system are you looking at and what all they have to offer. You will find companies that will offer heavens and earth. They will offer so many functions and so many items that you can pick from and customization. And smaller companies will need that. They just will not need that, right? But again, it might be very easy to just see the bright, flashing lights of a major company that everybody knows. It's a big name. You recognize it and you think, that's what I'm going to pay for. And if you're not using all of that functionality, it's really not worth the money, right? But as you look through what each company has to offer, as you look through what each system and software has to offer, look and try and understand what the needs of the organization are. And if possible, where is the organization going? If we're talking about a high growth organization, you need to evaluate what you have now, what you need now, but also the scalability of that system. Okay. So, for example, if you are working in a high growth organization or an organization that has expansion plans, you do not want to get started with a software company that has limited capability because eventually it might work now, but eventually you're going to have to switch. And migrating systems can be very challenging. There is a lot that can go wrong. And so if you can just work with a company that can grow with you, that's the best solution. Larger organizations will have the need for that, I call the big box software company, right? They're going to need that because they're going to need that capability. And so my advice is forget the flashing lights, right? Really look at what exactly are you getting for that price? What do you need? And looking ahead, is the organization going to need something that you can scale up, right? And then having those conversations with the software company to better understand, well, this is what I need now. I don't need everything. So how can you work with me on providing this now? And perhaps I'll pick up the rest later on as we grow. So can we work out to where we're not paying for all the features that we're not going to use now, but perhaps a year or two down the line, we expend. And so understanding your needs now and where the business is going and expected future needs will be crucial to determining what systems you should get at this point in time.
All right. So thank you, Diane, for your time. It was great interviewing you again. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to share some knowledge. Hopefully, it's been helpful. And I look forward to seeing more episodes. I've seen that we've recorded a few other episodes with other professions. I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of those.
All right. Thank you.